business, you really feel some of these things as we talk about them and say, what can we do better and how can we just make sure that there's speaking about them and supporting them. And that's what we do right here. Our live streams are still up on Facebook, YouTube, and on X, and our audience on KTN still here. As you go into the things that you need to do, imagine that as you're running around trying to set up your business, or that you're setting your goals and your aspirations are being turned into reality, just imagine that you have a trusted ally by your side all the time. Well, that's what I&M Bank promises you, empowering you with the tools and support to actually turn these into reality. So what is it that you're thinking about? A new business venture? Are you thinking about sending your children to school? Are you making sure that your future is secured? Well, I&M Bank is here for you. From flexible financial solutions to personalized guidance, I&M Bank is on your side, championing progress and celebrating your successes. So don't just bank, build your future with a partner who believes in you. Experience the power of on your side banking and find out more at any I&M Bank branch close to you. And remember always that I&M Bank is on your side. And those are the conversations that we have for this hour, remembering our proverb as we get into the last part of it, that whether the knife falls on the melon or the melon falls on the knife, it is the melon that gets hurt. Pick your side. Pick your side. Pick the side that you're on and remember where it is that you want to fall. And that's been our week of Proverbs from Mozambique this week. So we're asking a question this morning as we get into a conversation that over the last week, we've seen quite a number of things, and they've come from far and wide, that folks have said, you know what? Well, you have to deal with who you vote for, number one. That, well, I'm not going to bother voting because what good is my vote actually going to do? And so we're asking a question this morning as we get into the final conversation this week about why do you vote if you vote? And why don't you if you don't? We're diving into a vital topic, and it shapes the future of our communities and our nations, and that's voting. So across Africa, and especially here in Kenya, and also here in Kenya, I guess, elections are more than just political events. It's not just about the politics. They are powerful moments, and every voice has the chance to be heard. But have you ever wondered why some people choose to vote while others stay away from the polls? That people registered to vote. They went as far as registering to vote, but then you have an entire third of those who registered who decided not to vote. So we want to explore the reasons behind voter participation and abstention, from trust and awareness to accessibility and political engagement. We'll discuss why your vote matters, how it impacts governance, development, and the promise of a better tomorrow. So are you a first-time voter? Are you a seasoned citizen like Wanjiru here? How do we unpack the importance of voting and what it truly means for our country and continent's future? We're going to look at voting as one of the most powerful ways individuals can influence their government and society. It gives citizens the chance to choose leaders who represent their interests and values. So when people vote, they help decide who will make important decisions about laws, policies, and resources that affect everyday life, from education and healthcare to security and economic development. It is not just putting a paper in a box. It is these things that we talk about when you go to the vote. It also strengthens democracy by holding leaders accountable, or it should. When voters participate, politicians are more likely to listen and act in the country's or the public's best interest. So it's a way for people to express their opinions, support change, and protect the things they care about. It's crucial. It helps shape direction. It helps to allow peaceful transitions of power. Citizens contribute to building a fairer, more inclusive society where every voice should count. So simply put, voting is both a right and a responsibility. It's a key step forward toward shaping a future for yourself, for your community, and for your country. They can influence government and also society. So the question that we're asking today, if you vote, why do you vote? If you don't, why don't you? And people have often said, you voted for the person that you put in power, so keep quiet and let them rule. And if you didn't vote, then you don't have any business complaining about a government that is in power. So that's some of the questions that we're going to be asking today. What about those who don't vote? Should they still have a say? But before we get to that, why do we vote? And if you don't, why don't you?
You put it so well. My only thought is to say, after your very eloquent monologue, very, very eloquent, I would say that's the theory.
It is.
The theory is that, yes, you vote to be heard. The theory is you vote for a better future. It's your responsibility, all of that. The reality is we live in a very imperfect system. And I recall last election, my daughter didn't vote. She was eligible, didn't vote. And we talked about this back and forth. And she kept saying, but they're only, and she was part, I think, of the 1/3 that, there's a third that did pick the vote and not use it. Then there's a third that of youth, young people who had come into voting age, who didn't even pick their voters' cards. So she didn't even pick her voters' cards. And she said, but they're going to steal the election. And she kept saying the election is always rigged. And I told her, well, if you don't vote, then it's easier for them to rig. But in a way, she found me then sitting in front of the TV watching this long drawn out after the election and the election announcement, and then there was the dispute. There was this period of pregnant tension when we were waiting to say, what will the Supreme Court decide?
Yeah.
She was like, you see, I told you they'll steal the election. Look at you. So in a way, she embodied many of her age group. And this is the conversation they were having with each other. And in a way, they thought, we're wasting our time glued to the TV set or making phone calls or speaking back and forth, whereas the powers that be, those who hold the instruments of power or those who are able, will manipulate the election. But my view is that a marginal election is easier to steal than one that is resounding. So the message we have to get to young people and to voters is that even if the system is imperfect, your vote counts. So there's that disconnect. I think the second major disconnect is they say that the foundation or the bedrock of democracy is your local engagement.
Yep.
Democracy is learned in your everyday life. You don't learn it on voting day. So this idea that we do civic education in the build-up to elections and then stop means we are missing the point. So the extent to which somebody is engaged in local governance or daily governance is an indication of how engaged they are likely to be in elections. So I think, and maybe my final reflection will be, we are very removed from our electoral process. We treat it as an outside activity, outside of our daily lives. And the question we have to ask is, do we own our governance? Because once you own your governance, then voting on voting day is an extension of that. Yes. So who does the country belong to? And as the youth are out there protesting bad governance, what other strategies do they need to employ? Because they've made their voice. There's been a clampdown. We are still in a bad governance state. But what other spaces do they need to occupy? Because governance is not just voting day. Governance is every day.
So that's the thing. And I think it's interesting what you've said here, that we can then see voting patterns based on how plugged in individuals are on a daily basis. Because this governance, it cannot be, well, I feel like it on Tuesday, and then maybe I'm not going to touch it again until August, kind of thing. That if there is a daily, or rather we say if there is a regular plugged inness, as it were, with your governance at the very local level, at the very lowest level, whatever it is, the closest level, let's put it that way, that you're concerned and keeping leaders accountable, number one, asking questions about how things affect in your communities around, or making sure that things according to what you know should actually be done, that is going to actually fuel the decision that you might make when you go to the ballot. That when you go to the ballot is just it's an extension of this activity that you're doing.
We might need to break down what does the voting decision entail, and start at the very root, because the very foundation might be you voted today, then after that you engaged with who, you participated. We might need to break down those activities and say, how many of these are we engaged in? Or do we sleep for 4.5? No, talk, because Kenyans talk. For 4.5 years, then get riled up, vote, and then go back to sleep. How many people do that? And you can't transform a country if you're not engaged. Now, the reality though is, and I think in some, and maybe we need to focus on places where there are good leaders. Remembering leaders are at these 5 levels. These 5 levels aren't serving us particularly well right now. Aside from, if you have a president you can't stand, you then have a governor who you have a good chance that you might tolerate a bit better. If you don't stand them, maybe you'll say, okay, but at least the MP is not too bad. And then worst case scenario, at least you have the MCA. Now, if all aren't working, you might readily become disconnected. But there are structural barriers. So after citizens, let me put it positively, I think more active citizen engagement has given us better leaders. I think we had a good leader here yesterday. No leader is perfect, and I won't vouch for other things, but we saw, but politicians are still politicians. But by citizen engagement, you get better leaders, more responsive leaders. They are more aware that people are watching, because politicians must be watched. They're near power. Whenever you're near power, you're tempted to abuse it. And so citizen voice is very integral. People near power have to be checked. So that checking is important. And then we still contend with the structural issues.
The fear that I hear very many people talk about the facts, just like you mentioned about your daughter. Why should I engage in a process that you can almost always be guaranteed that there will be the fiddling of the process? And then, unfortunately, at the end of it, there is something that fuels that thought or that sentiment that it is very difficult for you to explain with the result. And it's also very difficult for you to make a case for you to come back and vote again. But that the voice of the people is expressed through the ballot. The desire of the people, that is the one way you can express it. You express it, and by virtue of that, you then now delegate responsibility through the ballot to these individuals who are going to hold fort for you. Because not everybody can do it. You need a few select who will then be able to run things. But the sentiment in the minds of many people is that, well, we just don't know how the outcome will be. And this points to a systemic issue that we have, that there are other jurisdictions who don't have electoral bodies, for example. It's run by volunteers. Why? The trust in the system is so great that people know that you're not going to fiddle with this thing, because constitutionalism, nationalism, patriotism is very high on the agenda of quite a number of jurisdictions. So they don't play with that process. And they also know that should you have tried to do anything, the nuts and bolts are screwed on so tightly that there is due diligence that will be applied to ensure that the right processes were followed. And in the event that they were not, there is a repercussion. And that's known across board. So the level that people have held themselves up in certain jurisdictions is that you don't even have to question. And that's why you have volunteers, people who will not be paid to sit at a booth, right? Will not be paid because they realize this is a process through which we will get accountable leaders. It's run by volunteers. And then that information is taken to the next spot. And they have a leader and everybody can look across. That's why you will have media who will then be able to announce an election results. And it is accepted across board because there's never the thinking that something could have gone wrong. That's why you can have voting by mail. That I'm going to be on holiday, but let me vote 2 months before and my vote will be secured. The people who tell you they won't vote, can we imagine such a system?
Yeah. First of all, just a slight addition to the point of we delegate our power. And our constitution, sovereignty is vested in the people to be exercised directly and in a delegated manner. And this is something political leaders, once they're in office, have a problem fathoming, that this direct exercise of sovereignty, which is the public participation, it's actually, we should even be able to have citizen arrests. Properly speaking, the way I think we diluted this provision in our laws, because citizen voice gets muzzled. It's often after citizens engage, it goes back to parliament. So direct authority, for instance, we used to have this process called LASDAP, which was the Local Authority Service Delivery Plan, that was used to identify projects for local governments. And LASDAP would form a citizen committee that would get the views of the public, rank projects and agree, okay, we're going to do these 5 projects this year. This is the envelope of money. And if this committee didn't sit and agree on those projects, the local authority could not spend that money. Porto Alegre is a big example in Brazil of participatory governance, where equally they had these kind of enforcement mechanisms for citizen action. There was, I can't remember which South American country that also had something similar. So the point is, our direct sovereignty has become a front-end exercise in that we engage, we participate, people show up, especially low-income groups more than middle class, because middle class tend, apart from now, things have changed. Gen Z are out there. More middle class are speaking up. You've heard like the Institute of Engineers speaking out when some appointment was made, and they're like, so middle class are realizing we can't delegate our advocacy to civil society and a few Boniface Mwangis and people like that. We need to speak for ourselves. But in the absence of that, you then have people in the informal settlements usually will show up for public participation because they rely on public services. So they want to go there and be heard. But when year after year you show up and nothing happens, then people become apathetic.
There you go.
Right? So our public participation, because Kenya has very active public participation, becomes a front-end exercise, including when you had this, I'm trying to think of, I'm forgetting the example, but there was a big corruption scandal where the officials were saying, but we have a record of public participation, but the people who showed up for that public participation were the officials
of the same office
organization.
Yes.
So that's the kind of thing that the court can strike out. So where does that leave us? We have a progressive constitution and a regressive culture that has subverted our direct democracy. We are still not fully convinced in our representative democracy for good reasons. So what do we do? Linked to that, we have major governance deficits. And as you were speaking, I thought maybe one of the mistakes we've made is thinking our politics will cure our integrity and trust. That might be a social issue that we need to discuss as a social issue. And if we fix that, we can fix the politics. As opposed to now we keep saying when we get a good leader, a leader and you, we will then become a nation of integrity.
Because the thing is that even though you're going to have, you could have the Messiah, right? But look at any process that brought about a leader that was going to change things. The channels had to be receptive. And what does that mean? That you have your manners in order. And I'm going to use a biblical example. That when Moses went to the top of the mountain to get the 10 commandments, he came down the first time and he found that people were doing nonsense at the bottom. What did he do? He broke them and made them drink the chalk from the tablets, right? And these were the ones, according to the Bible, written by God. He then had to go and write new ones with his hand. But the channel had to be receptive to this new law, to this leader. The channel had to be receptive. That the same thing, even when you see other examples, even the Lee Kuan Yews that we talk about, the people had to be receptive. Everybody essentially had to fall in line. That is not the politics of the day, because the truth is that the population is in the majority. The leaders are in the minority. So upon whom are they translating this governance? Upon whom are they translating this leadership? The channel through which they do that also must be receptive. So these socio-political issues that we talk about, these socio-economic issues that we talk about, the corruption, it's not just here, but it trickles through. It trickles through to everybody. That the bad manners that we talk about needs to be stemmed. The impunity that we see rampant and that is displayed in things like corruption needs to actually be sorted. But it is across. CT often says, we like our corruption. We like our impunity. We like it. We like it.
We are comfortable with it. It's what we know.
Do, yeah.
Change scares us.
Yes. So
Yeah.
can we like this thing? Can we like this thing so much? And then a new leader is going to come and change it if we are not also receptive?
Of these throngs going into these harambes and reaching out for money. And you might say, well, this is low income. People show up and they're waiting for politicians to dish out what they know, of course, is stolen money, because that's not anybody's benevolence. But professionals do it in a different way. They call it lobbying. And so everyone is, looking to political power to give them goodies. I was thinking about this double consciousness. This Joe Kobudi, who's a political scientist. I don't know if you've heard him.
I have, yeah, we have.
He likes to quote Du Bois. He calls him Du Bois. It might be Dubois.
It's Dubois.
It's Dubois.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we are Kenyans. So we say yes. When he was talking about the struggle of African Americans, he was saying that this double consciousness is when you mirror the behavior of your oppressor, and yet you're trying to find your own identity and sense of justice separate from them.
They cause trouble for us here too.
Yes,
so yeah.
Keep them.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? I just thought that is such an enslaved mentality, because you're saying that a Kenyan can go into another country, be abducted or be detained or whatever, mistreated, and it's okay. That could be your child. But at that moment, what he was thinking about is his own selfish interest, and was not able to ascend to a national interest because of this very localized village-like mentality. And so I just think there's also another term that's used of cognitive dissonance, where on one hand we aspire to be democratic, but on the other we are very clannish. So you said earlier that we need therapy.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we need to recognize our politics will not cure our problems as Kenyans. And I'm not saying Mudavadi, once you cure Mudavadi, everyone else will be okay. But I think we are all part of this process, and we really need to ask ourselves, how do we break out of this very toxic cycle that we have of abuse? Because every time Kenyans come near public money, they want to steal it, and they think it's okay. Every time they come near power, they think, what's in it for my direct benefit? And it's across the board. Politicians say their electorate, their voters, chase them for jobs. They say, that's why I don't go home, because
they're all disturbing me.
They're all disturbing me.
Former provost of the Anglican Church, Sami Wainaina, said something very interesting. And he said, you know what? It would look across board that we point fingers a lot at leadership, who again are in the minority. But the reason why many of us are not in the same position when it comes to then being able to divert funds, or even people who are in state office, or with this story that we've seen today on the headlines of the Standard about some crazy money that's being moved.
A 0.9 kilometer road for 9 billion or something.
9 billion bob, The reason why there are not more people is because they've not been given the opportunity. That it would seem as though, because you don't have the opportunities, why we can point fingers, but having been given the opportunity, maybe the names would also be on the list. And I think I saw the truth in that, but at the same time, I saw the fear that I felt in that. That why wouldn't it be the other way? That why wouldn't we say that? Do we really want to fix things? Do we really want to get on the right side?
And what things? The other thing is that it's complex, and we tend to be very linear in saying he's corrupt, therefore he's bad. this person, I know them, I trust them, therefore they are good. The reality is they intermarry. Our economy, bad economic situation makes people do bad things, our society. So when you're looking at transformation, you have to look at the social, you have to look at the political, you have to look at the culture, you have to look at the economic. And a lot of our anti-corruption programs have been very linear.
Yeah.
They haven't been holistic, thinking about all these factors. So I think now there's actually a lot of literature coming out saying, guys, this thing is real. And we need to recognize that people are very multifaceted. I am encouraged by Kenya because much as we are in a very, very dark time, like many people, I think the young people of our nation have shown they're fed up with the way things are. And so that energy brings an opportunity to do things better. But if it's not tapped, where does it go?
Indeed. And those are the questions. We'd like to take calls from you. So people vote for certain reasons. Maybe they feel Sonnet has said that he voted because their mother told them when they were growing up that it is responsibility to vote. So you grow up thinking, yeah, I have to vote, something that I'm supposed to do. Others are looking and saying, well, you know, we have a responsibility to put in a new leader every now and then, so I've got to vote. Then there are those who feel, look, you voted, don't complain. These are the people that you put in power, don't ever. My Take is here telling us every morning about how you guys are complaining about something that you put in power. So if you didn't vote, can you complain? That's the question that we'll be asking when we come back from this break at 25 minutes to 10. We'll open up the phone lines and then hear from you. Should you not have voted, do you have a right to complain about current governance? After the break.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to...
Lazima wai, tuna finish kumalo. Round this, tuna finish kumalo. Lazima wai, tuna finish kumalo. Kubash to life, tuna malo. Wai, tuna finish kumalo. Ay, kwa Yesu kuna bamba. Nilimdigi kwa shini kwetu kubamba. Usipambane sana. I'm real, jumia mini bamba. We, kubamba. Kubash, iskule vina bamba. Kubash, kubash. Kubamba. Kubash, iskule vina.
When I have back pain, I reach for 2 tablets of Panadol Extra for fast relief of strong pain like headache, toothache, muscle pain. And I am finally released from pain. Try Panadol for fast and effective relief from strong pain. Now available at an affordable price.
As an abstract artist, I am free to allow my mind to be as creative as it wants, to go in whichever direction that it goes without having any boundaries or limitations. Surprisingly, my ideas come from very simple things. It could be anything, very random things. If you notice your child has an artistic talent, support them. If you see, for example, they are scribbling on the wall with charcoal, okay, that is wrong. Don't beat them. Just tell them, don't scribble on the wall, don't scratch the wall. What you do, you tell them that's not right, but you buy for them a drawing book, you buy for them a pencil. Talent knows no color. Talent knows no race. Talent knows no ethnicity. Anybody can enjoy it. Anybody can appreciate it. And it's for all of us to enjoy and appreciate it.
Speak about the other has been curated using newspapers. I see you.
Him seeing his grandfather liking reading newspaper, it struck an interest in him.
It has taken us a whole year to complete the whole job.
This was once a church. It was moved from where it was and planted here.
Somebody saw the value in it and made it into art.
Karen Village is a creative innovation hub center.
You are a creative nerd, art speaks to you, and you are a history buff. I tell you, this place is for you.
FM, Nairobi.
Final show of this week, and we're looking at questions that we're asking this morning, and it's interesting that we're looking at the comments and many of you filling in here and saying, well, you know what? In terms of the options that we have at the end of the day, usually people just go in last minute. And essentially, we talked about that as well. But here is where they're also saying, well, it's like the buffet where they tell you that there will be a continental breakfast. But then you find toast and one egg and maybe half a sausage.
And you're hungry.
And you're hungry. So you say, you know what?
I'll just eat.
Let me just eat.
That is so well put. That is so, like I was just saying when we were on break that we'd run some citizen awareness work. It was actually a leadership program. We were looking at local governance. And, these are people who understand the issues. And of course, you can't tell people how to vote, but there was an understanding of how not to vote. There were some criminals and people not prosecuted in court, but in the
court of public opinion.
Yes, and when these are teachers of governance, when it come after voting day, one came back to say, at the end of the day, the clan called. The voting decision was changed a day or two to the voting day.
Because
so
of where
that
you're
weekend,
from.
That's why it's that period is very important. When campaigns aren't allowed there, it now goes local. The other one said, no, I made a decision. They went for the egg and the
half a sausage,
and it was a very bad deal. That one was bad. The guy didn't even finish. Didn't even finish the term. It was chaotic. Yeah. So voting decisions are they come from a different place. They are not cerebral. They're not in they're not logical. They have to do with beliefs. They have to do with your fears. They come from the gut.
Right.
And the gut speaks a different language.
I see. The question that we're asking, if you vote, why do you actually vote? Is it because your parents said, you know what, when you become 18 and you get an ID, you must register as a voter and be involved in a process that's going to bring in the next leader? Do you vote because you've seen other people doing it and say, hey, what are you guys doing on Thursday? We are voting. Okay, let's go. Or do you say, you know what, I want to be directly involved in who the leadership is in the next round? And for those who vote, what are the reasons? What are some of the things we've heard, Wanjiru? Well, you know what? It's going to be stolen anyway, so why bother? Oh, my vote actually doesn't count. Well, you know what? In a democracy, everyone's voice matters, whether they vote or not, because governance affects everyone's life. Think about it. Whether you vote or not, your life, whether you vote for your candidate or not, whether you don't vote at all, this governance that comes into place at the end of this cycle will affect your life. However, choosing not to vote is also often seen as stepping away from that direct responsibility. When people don't vote, they give up some influence over decisions that affect their communities and the future. That said, not voting does not mean someone should be completely excluded from discussions or efforts to improve society. People can express their opinions, advocate for change, and hold leaders accountable in many ways beyond voting. In essence, voting is a crucial way to shape governance, but democracy also thrives on broad participation, discussions, activism, community engagement, and not just at the ballot box. Like you said, the ballot box is essentially, one of the last cogs in this system that you do that. But it will be interesting to hear from people today, and our lines are open on 0719012600. That's 0719012600. Why do you vote if you do? Why don't you vote if you don't? And what about those who don't vote? Should they still have a say? Should they still have a say? There are questions around weighted voting, and it's a little bit sticky. That there are jurisdictions that believe that certain people in society are the ones who should make decisions about who their leadership will be. Because all this other fluff is just a waste of time. People now will go and vote because somebody gave them some money. Others will go and vote because they were bored on that day. But there are people who will make critical decisions, and I'm not even sure what process selects them. But there are people who will make decisions based on crucial issues, whether it's economics, whether it's social issues, whether it's justice, whether it's development, whatever it will be. But that vote has a weight, that my vote or your vote will carry twice, thrice the vote of somebody else, because I have the critical thinking, I have thought through the process, and I can see the end from here. Not democratic, because everybody should have a go at the thing. But people have said, we've wasted so much time and resources on who comes into the position, and we don't apply as much critical thinking to this process as we ought to. So is there a case for weighted voting?
My thinking? We are an emerging democracy. So we are a democracy with a lot of contradictions. On one hand, very democratic. On other hands, very authoritarian, very repressive, with a very, very regressive culture, including our own. So if we recognize that we are part of the process of building a democratic society, then I think the motivation might be higher. Because then if you aren't voting, what are you saying? So I think, this is the question you were asking earlier. Should we focus on what's not working? Should we focus on what is working? I think we need to begin encouraging people to recognize that their actions do count, but that those benefits may be seen by the next generation. Like, we are enjoying independence that we never fought for. We are enjoying multi-party democracy that most of us never fought for. We are enjoying a constitution that a majority of the country never fought for. And so this generation needs to ask, what's their contribution? And to some extent, that this generation has actually come out in an amazing way to say their contribution is to push for good governance. And the question then becomes, how does this momentum get turned into change, into transformation? What are the missing links? So the voting decision, to my mind, sits on so many other things. By the time you go to vote, you've thought about the leaders, you've thought about your life, you've thought about your citizenship. Do you even care about this country? You can be so disenfranchised or so disappointed that you've checked out. You live here, but you're like, you don't believe in any of it. And I think a lot of people have checked out. A lot of the 1/3, there was an intentional 1/3 who picked their voter's card and decided, I don't like the ugly faces on those ballots, I'm not showing up. I think that's a protest vote. Then there are others who didn't even pick the card, and that proportion has checked out. But I don't think elections are such an important decision, but it's not the only decision. And I think in a presidential system, look at America, it seems like the only decision that matters.
Yes.
Even us, I think, you get a president who comes and appends everything, turns everything around. Presidential systems, in my view, are a problem.
Why?
Because they give too much power to, and Kenya is a country where there are attempts to check that power. So what am I saying about the voting decision is also determined by the system. And you heard Prof here, Kagwanja, saying that we got it wrong. This electoral system is not working for us. So when Kenyans don't show up, it's not that there's something wrong with them. There's also something wrong with the system, because who in their right mind wastes their time on a process that they can't influence and that won't give them results? So our electoral system is broken, and that's why our voting outcomes are not working. But by the same token, if we want to change it, we need a voter's card, because we have to vote so that we can get the power to change it.
And there have been many interesting processes where people have said, you know what, here's a process or transition through where you can actually get your voter's card, but don't just keep it in your house under lock and key, but that you must actually engage it, that you must activate it and, turn it in for the vote. But that apathy that is still there when you wake up, that without realizing the power, if there is any power that can be allocated to it, realizing that the power that you wield with that is affecting your life. That the things we complain about, imagine, Wanjiru, the things that we complain about every day, there's no this, it's not adequate, it doesn't work here and there, can be influenced directly by this decision that you make.
No, that's not true. It can't be influenced.
It can't?
No, it can't.
Why?
Because
the person that you put into...
We had a contested election, for instance, in 2017. We never even knew that result. So we had computer-generated results. People went out and voted. twice.
You know, you're limiting this to the Kenyan experience.
Yes.
And I'm saying that it is
because
possible.
Voting is the gut. It is not in America, I saw they voted, so now I'll vote. It is my reality. So if my reality is I saw that the MCA who was elected, and maybe there's more incentive with MCA because it's very easy to remove MCA. I think disenchantment and refusal to engage in the voting process also sends a message about a system that's failing. However, the quandary is, if I don't vote, how will I change the system that I don't like? So, I understand the reasons for not voting. But if you don't have a voter's card and you don't show up, how do you then become part of removing this system? For instance...
So there is an argument for using your voter's card.
For instance, right now we've been told by the IEBC that they need to do delimitation of boundaries, and they can't do that until, I don't know, what year did they say? Anyway, they need another 2-3 years to do this process. If there's a discussion about extending the term of this government, there might then be a question about, are we going into a caretaker government or are we extending the term of this regime? So these crucial questions are likely to be very present in our very, soon to be with us future, if there's any such thing. If you don't have a voter's ID and a voter's card, you will not participate in crucial decisions. So
now, this is what I'm asking you, because you're saying that there's importance in getting this voter's card.
Yes.
And that there is something that it can do. There is something that it can do if you vote. No? Because if there isn't something it can do, why should you have it?
What I'm saying is that be ready. Be very ready. And the only way to be ready is to have an ID, a voter's card, and to be aware. And there are important votes coming up in this country. Number one, Gen Z have said they are doing one term. That is, if they want to make good on that, they need to get the voter's card and they need to vote, but they need to do voters' education. The regime is working very hard to ensure it can confuse people by giving handouts and so many things so that they forget there is a one-term agenda. So voting might not work and there's high apathy, but to get over apathy, you need strong civic education, strong political education. And this is why you're seeing when the state begins to clamp down on people who are doing political education, you really get a sense that there are people in quarters that are very scared about what an empowered, enlightened, and armed with ID cards and voters card Gen Z can actually do. So voting is a game of numbers. It's a game of strategy. It's not a game. It's not a wasteful game. It's not like being on Twitter where you go at your convenience. It really takes a lot of energy. The question is, do young voters, this young voting bloc that has a vision for a different Kenya, do they have that discipline and drive to really turn their anger into something? And of course, that entails a vote. That entails several votes.
There also then would be that the government of the day should actually be interested that there is voter education, that they do know about that people know about the processes, that people understand options, and people understand just how wide, it can be accommodating everybody. And that there would be a direct throttling of that process when, for some reason, a vote count doesn't go right. And that there would be an influencing of that process for things to go in there. Can we get to the point whereby even the government of the day is insisting on transparency, is insisting on proper management and accountability of a system which would bring in or keep you as the current government?
My answer is this headline: KPA billions loot. And a reminder of this one paragraph that said, shockingly, not all, as Dennis would say, not shockingly, even the very institutions meant to safeguard public funds, oversight state bodies, internal auditors, regulators, all appear to have deliberately looked the other way. So government has no incentive to, not government. Our political leaders, present political leadership has no incentive to empower and to create awareness in Kenyans because they want power. And they've instrumentalized state organs for their own interest. And they've instrumentalized security organs to repress genuine voice. So the question we should really be asking is, will young people show up to get are they picking their IDs, voters' cards?
This is
will they
interesting.
be able to get it?
Will they be able to get it? Because that's
Will
when you
they
see
be
state
able
machinery
to
throttling the
campaign?
process.
Will they be able to stand? Because the big block in our electoral process is the threat of violence. That one can stymie any process.
That you said that will they be able to campaign if there is a new entrant onto the scene?
Exactly.
Will they actually be able to campaign with everybody else? Will there be the threat that they could be bought off or muzzled so that they don't take on what would be the new interest, the new one leading the way kind of thing? I think to the election that brought in Bola Tinubu, and that it would have in Nigeria, and it would have appeared that there was this wave of Peter Obi. And that everybody the things he was saying were right. The reforms that he wanted to bring in were spot on. And the way in which he wanted to do this was great. There was no longer going to be an over-reliance on oil for the Nigerian economy, that agriculture was going to come back and take its root, and so on and so forth. And everybody was buzzing. And I'm not joking. From the north to the south, from the east to the west, everybody was buzzing on this new man.
A transformational moment was...
Who, when he was the governor of a state, did phenomenal things in his state. And people said, fantastic. We'll take this, we'll extrapolate it to the rest of the country. If he can do it in the southeast in one state, because of it's a federal system, then surely the principle is what matters. And he can apply it to the nation. It was a buzz. Everywhere was Obi. Then come election, and numbers don't lie. Well, okay, they shouldn't lie. Well, 18 million people did not vote. That's a big deal.
So what happened?
That is the question. What happens? Because we can shout here. People go get your voter's card. As you go to a bash, the way to enter into the club is with your voter's card. The kind of thing. We do all of this. And that's the question. What happens? We know what needs to happen. We know who can make it happen. We know how we can make it happen. But then we don't. Why?
So
why do 8 million
didn't believe
that this thing can actually happen? And that's where I agree with you, that we are so shackled to this thing of oppression or suppression that we cannot imagine that there would be a place whereby, my God, things can actually work in the way in which they ought to. That a system can become so clear from that you can look through and you can see the other side in the peephole. That are we as a people, and take your pick. It's South Africa, it's Tanzania, it's Kenya, it's Nigeria, throughout. And that's the thing. That's almost, maybe Namibia, again, like we heard, is the nation that is actually saying, okay, fine, we can actually make this thing work. Are we afraid to choose right?
Of course, we are all afraid of change. And I think you also said that we are so, you said City says Kenyans love their thieves because you're comfortable with what you know. Everyone fears
You like
change.
what you know. You like what you know.
Yes, and you fear change. And then also for us in Kenya, the real example is that our multi-party democracy was hard won. And Kibaki ran, I think, two times before eventually the NAC, so we could say it wasn't Kibaki as such, but we had multi-party elections in 92, multi-party elections in 97. There was violence in 97. There were scatterings of that in 92. But in 2003, eventually, there was that break. There was a conflation of issues. There was intense civic education. There was a unity of purpose across religious. Everyone was like, this thing is going to happen. So you don't remove a dictator through episodic goodwill and feel good and through street marches.
It's going to be...
That's the reality.
Yeah, that's the reality. It's going to be hard. It's going to be bloody, but it's necessary. Abi?
We were fortunate. Of course, it was bloody if you count the 10 years. Of course, it was bloody if you count the 20 years of trying to remove dictatorial rule even before Moi came in. We were fortunate that at the final, when Moi finally acceded, that 2002 election was not a bloody election because he finally acceded. But prior to that, of course, lives had been lost and people had been maimed and exiled. Institutions had been broken. So yes, it is bloody. And yes, and when you're looking at Boniface Mwangi, this happened in Tanzania. But he's a casualty of the activism that's taking place in Kenya. And unfortunately, for some reason, Tanzania has decided to get involved in that. Maybe that's their own issue. Yes, it is bloody, it is painful, but it doesn't happen by chance. So right now, I think
it's got to be deliberate.
I think right now we are in the feel-good phase.
Of what?
We're in the feel-good phase that, there are numbers, that there's a sense of we can talk about it, we can build up momentum.
Let me tell you something.
Momentum and votes.
Wanjiru, look around the world. There is not, and it has never happened anywhere in history that to bring in a change in terms of government or leadership, that it was a peaceful thing where I come to your house and we have a cup of tea and I say, Wanjiru, will you hand over the reins of leadership to me? And you say, oh yes, Ndu, sure. Would you like to lead now? You may have it. No. It hasn't happened anywhere. Look where you want. There has never been anything but a difficult struggle for the takeover of power that instituted a government upon which people can then say there's a systemic way of doing things and we're heading towards the right direction. Nowhere has it happened in the history of time that a handover was peaceful. That's why we have the great wars that we read about in history, because what did they birth? What did they bring in? And it's that reality sometimes that we have to keep in mind. Go forward.